And, again, I think we're looking forward, trying to better understand what does that next generation of independent living look like, because, in all probability, it's not going to look like the independent living that was built in 1991.
You're listening to Bridge the Gap Season 5, a podcast dedicated to informing, educating, and influencing the future of housing and services for seniors. This season is powered by sponsors AccuShield, Inquire, One Day, LTC REIT, It's Never Too Late, Meridian Capital, Solinity, and the Bridge Group Construction.
Welcome to Bridge the Gap podcast, the senior living podcast with Josh and Lucas. We have a great friend on, and one that probably everybody in the industry knows. We've got the infamous, the famous David Schless. He's the president and CEO of ASHA out of DC. Welcome back to the program, David.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here. Pleasure to be here. It's always great to talk to you guys. As I hope you know, I'm a big fan of Bridge the Gap, and delighted to spend some time with you today.
Well, we feel the exact same way. We love spending time with you and your team. And we're going to go into a couple of big topics as we enter into this 2022 year that are of importance to our listeners and to the industry. You are big on advocacy, and you have advocacy programs specifically around consumer education efforts and a initiative called Where You Live Matters. And you've been at that for a few years, and we would love to hear about the progression of Where You Live Matters has taken, and some of the insights that you've gained, and what your goals are at ASHA with Where You Live Matters.
Sure. Well, Where You Live Matters was an initiative that we launched several years ago. And it was really the first time ASHA really directly said, we're going to try and deal with consumers and their families. And we had, in the previous probably 25 years or so, we had never done that directly. And that was it was kind of a big move for us. It was part of a strategic planning initiative. As we typically do, we pull a committee together of members who really help us think about how we want to approach things. And at the end of the day, we really wanted to make sure that Where You Live Matters was non-commercial. I mean, we really looked at it as almost like a public service. And the goal was to try and help empower older adults and their families to really better understand their options, and really, I would say that was the kind of primary goal was, help people kind of navigate what can be a very confusing roadmap and what their options are. And that was the initiative. We launched it with Glenn Devins out of Kansas City, and they're, of course, now Attain, and we continue to work with Attain. It's been a really good partnership for us. And, we've just made a very solid commitment to investing in content, which, again, helps us make sure that the site is fresh, that it's got, a wide range of material, whether it's video content, whether it's checklists, whether it's editorial. So it's, really stayed robust. And it's a multifaceted digital platform. So it has a Facebook component, an Instagram component. This year in 2022, we're going to try Pinterest, because, again, what we see with Pinterest is the potential to get to maybe a younger age demographic in terms of interact with Where You Live Matters. So it's been a real commitment to try and empower older adults and their families. And as I've been in the business over the years, that one of the things that has always struck me is, the people who move into our communities almost always, say, gosh, I wish I had done this earlier. I wish I knew about this. I wish I moved sooner. And I think when I think about Where You Live Matters, it's really an initiative that's aimed at helping a consumer or their family maybe make a decision sooner. And maybe it's 6 months sooner, maybe it's a year sooner, maybe it's 3 months sooner, but it's helping them make a decision. And the other thing that we did a few years ago is we had not initially had a community locator on the site. We added that a few years ago, and really, there's several thousand ASHA member communities on Where You Live Matters in the U.S. and in Canada. And again, I think we just wanted to add that as almost as a source of convenience if someone was on the website looking for information about the veterans aid and attendance benefits, that they could actually look for assisted living in Knoxville, Tennessee. And what we have seen is that, yes, I mean, there are people who do access that community locator at all hours of the day, 7 days a week. Again, so that was one of those things that we hadn't initially thought about doing, and we added it, and that's, I think, worked out very well for the consumer and for the for the industry as well. The site itself really was a tremendous help to us during the COVID period, because we wanted to try and do some public relations work, and we kind of had this platform, and we're able to use an advertising strategy that that allowed somebody to go to Where You Live Matters, and we had added a lot of content there that somebody could look at to get the real story of what was happening in these communities. And I think that was also where we kind of realized that there's a dollar for dollar relationship between how much you spend and how many people come visit the website. We had 30 some million people that were on the website in 2020, and that was driven by financial commitments we made to various media sites across the country, from the Boston Globe to the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, Dallas, Atlanta. We just kind of covered the country, and so that was something I don't think anybody ever thought, like, oh yeah, we're going to use Where You Live Matters for this PR effort, but it was incredibly beneficial to have had that platform there. And then this year we're going to move into Pinterest, which is kind of a new area for us. Again, we'll kind of pilot it and see how that works. Where You Live Matters is kind of a living, breathing, constantly evolving platform for us. And I think it's one of those. I would say probably the area that we have not done as well with Where You Live Matters as we would like is getting the industry to use it as a resource, which it really is. And there's
right,
just a ton of good content that can be used by a sales counselor or somebody who's following up with a prospective resident, and a lot of folks in the industry I don't think realize that all of that, all those resources are there for them to potentially use as well.
Well, you bring up such a great point there. As occupancy continues to be, a topic of conversation, we're all looking for resources and content. And then the other big things that I hear out of this is something that's very close to bridge the gap is changing public perception. Oftentimes, to your point, Dave, we hear from residents, I wish I'd done this sooner. But before that comment takes place, you hear from the adult daughters or the family members that are trying to help navigate this is very confusing. Where are the resources? Where are the insights? Josh, we talk about that frequently, and this kind of changing perception. This is a kind of a clashing of all of these different ideas in an effort to try to help in those categories.
It really is. And education is at the forefront of that, and the research surrounding the education. And ASHA does such an amazing job at that. As a member of ASHA myself, I look forward to every so often getting the research, not only by email, but the materials, the printed materials. So actually, I just got in the last couple of weeks, Dave, the great book. I think you call it the Senior Living Guidebook. Is that right?
Yeah, probably the State of Seniors Housing.
Yeah. So that book is such a great resource because obviously we've got a few different areas of the country that we're specifically working in, but that particular gives really this global perspective of what's going on in each sector of the senior living industry and senior housing that helps to frame kind of the industry for us and all the different segments. Can you talk to us a little bit about the research that ASHA typically does, but what more specifically here in 22, what are some of the specific initiatives that you guys have going?
Sure. So, I think when ASHA was started, which was back in the early 90s, it was, there was very little data out there at all on anything. And that was what it was. One of the things we first, started to do was finding some different avenues to, collect data. Obviously, some of it we do now with other groups like NIC and Argentum, et cetera. But I think it's always something we're focused on. It's ASHA's kind of a unique animal because it's more of a boutique. And I always say that ASHA is not the right group for all people, and we're focused in certain areas. One of those categories for us has always been research, and so we put probably about a third of our budget into research, and we're always. I would say if there's one thing I like to think about ASHA, it's there's no bureaucracy. I mean, we're always looking at listening to the members and reading emails and answering calls, and almost all of our research has probably started with somebody who sent an email or picked up the phone or just said, I'm looking for this, or I'm struggling with that. And, can you think about, is there a study there we can do? And almost all of what we've done, and some of what we do, are kind of annual surveys. The State of Seniors Housing, we started in 1992, initially with what was then Coopers and Lybrand, now Price Waterhouse Coopers. And that was kind of a early effort to, understand, just basic revenue and expense data for the industry. And it's evolved. It's 1,000 times better than it was when we first started doing it. An annual state regulatory handbook that we do that is based on a survey we do of the states. So some of those things we do, and I'm not going to say, they ever get easier. The State of Seniors Housing it's a monstrous project, and Colleen Blumenthal and Samantha Medred at Health Trust do a fabulous job, and NIC and Argentum and NCAL, Leading Age. I mean, everybody's involved in that. Then we're always looking for new projects, and I think we've started to do some really interesting work with Ann Tumlinson and her team at ATI Advisory. Last year, we did what will become an annual project now, which is called the Senior Housing Data Book. That's really looking at Medicare consumer beneficiary data, and it's very focused on different segments of the older adult population and how they spend healthcare dollars, how they utilize the healthcare system. So that's an annual project that we'll be doing with them again. One of our new studies this year, again, we're doing with ATI, is really focused on looking at socialization and the impact of socialization on physical and mental well-being, and conversely, social isolation and the impacts that has on physical and mental well-being. And that's one of those projects that I think we all inherently know that one of the real benefits of senior living is that that sense of community and that sense of being connected with other people in social ways. And And I think there's a probably a policy element to what this research is going to do for us too, because as you both know, I mean, there's kind of this, sense that, everything that is being done on a policy side should be focused on keeping somebody in their home. Yeah, for some people, they've got networks of family and friends, and that's great. That's a great option for people, but there are unique benefits of, living in community. And we think that this is one of those, projects that will be, beneficial in terms of kind of, helping to shine the light on that. So that's a new project we're very excited about this year. And then another project we'll be doing this year, again, another research project with ATI. It's really kind of looking at, revenue opportunities for operators associated with new services. And so again, these are, kind of areas that, I think the industry's starting to look at. I think, some companies more so than others. But again, are there opportunities to partner with innovative new health insurance companies that are willing to potentially pay you for things that you're doing, or maybe things that you aren't doing but could do, to again help ensure the well-being of older adults that are living in your community? So that's again kind of a new area of research for us, and that'll happen this year as well. And then just another project I want to mention is one that we're going to be doing with Promatura out of Oxford, Mississippi, and we've done a lot of research with Promatura over the years. And again, a lot of what we try and collect data on is consumer research. How can we better understand who lives in our buildings? And maybe more importantly, how can we better understand, the folks who look just like our residents, but haven't made that decision to move? And so we're going to be doing a independent living study. It's actually in the field right now. That will be very, not looking this segment of the study. The study will have some historic IL data. It will have some current IL data. So, what does the current IL resident look like? But it's really a forward-looking study. It's going out to people who don't live in these communities. It's about a 20-page questionnaire, so it's a very detailed survey. It will be, scientifically representative of a very robust study. And again, I think we're looking forward, trying to better understand what does that next generation of independent living look like, because in all probability, it's not going to look like the independent living that was built in 1991.
Well,
it's totally different.
That is really great information for our listeners that maybe aren't familiar with this information that is published, that's you can get access to. ASHALiving.org. I would highly encourage you to go check it out. Also, Dave was talking about Where You Live Matters, which is whereyouliveMatters.org. We've got a lot of listeners, as we know. You may be listening right now and you're not familiar with any of this because you're new to our industry, or maybe you're a student that's thinking about getting into our industry. Understanding our industry is key, where it's been, where it is, where it's going. And the folks there at ASHA, Dave's team, does a great job. So rounding out our show, Dave, one last thing that I don't want to miss out on, just kind of getting a summary on, is the all-important topic of advocacy. You guys have a lot going on. I've actually seen some exciting, really, I guess, synergy was the way I would say it. A lot of momentum around also the PAC that you guys have started. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. So again, I mentioned we're focused, and we're kind of focused in three areas: the research, meetings, which we probably won't get into today, but the third is advocacy. And that was really when ASHA was started. We were started by a group called the National Multifamily Housing Council, which is basically a multifamily housing group that started us in 1991, kind of incubated us, and really terrific group. It was a group that was started by some of the giants in multifamily housing, Trammell Crow and Preston Butcher and Howard Ruby, and just really an incredible organization. And so Advocacy wanted to provide a voice for companies that develop, own, and operate senior living. It was initially primarily for-profit oriented, or companies that were for-profit oriented. So it's always been something that we've been really very focused on. Maybe a little bit unique for us is we've always really tried to focus on tax issues. The tax treatment of this type of real estate is unique, and to some extent, there's not, we're not necessarily apartments, we're not necessarily hotels, we're not, so there's some unique tax issues. So that's always been a kind of a core focus for us. We created a Seniors Housing Political Action Committee in the mid-90s. So it was probably the first of the senior living PACs that was focused on supporting federal candidates on the basis of senior living issues. So we're not supporting local candidates. So these are just people that are federal candidates. So it's the House and the Senate. And I would say historically really tried to spend roughly what we bring in. So, this past year, we raised about $525,000. We spent, it's not an exact number, but I think we ended up, contributing about $505,000 or $510,000. So, again, roughly bring it in, and you're supporting members on a bipartisan basis. And obviously, the past couple of years have just been, incredibly intense legislative, advocacy efforts, and that PAC is it's indispensable, because you're not buying anyone's vote. That's not how the PAC works. But you're getting, direct face time with members of Congress, who really are in a position to make decisions that impact you. And I would say over the course of the past couple of years, I'm not sure that the industry would have gotten any federal assistance at all in terms of provider relief funds if we didn't have that access. I'll tell you a quick story. I always remember this one, but there was a senator from Florida who's no longer in the Senate, and he was in a previous life he had been an insurance commissioner, and he, this was a long time ago. This is back in the 80s. There had been some, I'm just going to say scandals, because there were some scandals involving entrance fee CCRCs a long time ago, but really not reflective of the modern senior living. And so I always remember we supported this individual, the senator, and had an opportunity to have breakfast. We'd spend an hour, we'd chat, and I think over a period of time, I think we were able to convince him, and he ultimately became the chairman of the Senate Agent Committee. Yeah, I think we had these opportunities to convince him that, look at what happened in 1980, or what you saw, when you were an insurance commissioner before you entered, politics. It's not reflective of the modern business. And I would say over the years, I'm not sure he was, necessarily always a great friend of the industries, but I will say this. When we first started, having those opportunities to have dialogues with him, he was, he had a very incorrect and very negative perception of the industry. And by the time he left the Senate, that we were able to change his perception. And so, that's maybe a kind of an extreme example, but it is just, so important to have those opportunities to, discuss the industry's perspective with elected officials. And so the PAC has just been a really important part of that whole process. Obviously, I think, again, we've talked about this, the industry, needs to do a better job, getting local, state elected officials into these communities to come in and have coffee with the residents. And, because as you guys know, I mean, if you haven't had a direct personal involvement with senior living, whether it's independent living or assisted living or CCRCs, you don't know what it is. Nursing home, you have no idea what it is. And so that's one of those things that I think everybody can do, whether you've got one community, whether you've got 100 communities. I mean, that's just, we all need to take those opportunities. The residents love it. It's great for it's great for somebody who's, up for reelection for Congress. So, I really encourage that, that type of activity to take place. And, all of these things are really important in, making sure that people understand, okay, I get it. You're serving a population that is 80 plus, that maybe has some physical or mental limitations, but I get it because I've seen it with my own two eyes. I know what you do. And if you haven't had that direct, relationship, which again, some members of Congress have, but many of them haven't had. So that's a really important thing, to be focused on as an industry in the months and years ahead. It's really important.
Well, you're exactly right, Dave. So developers, owners, operators, people interested in getting into the industry, thinking about a career in the industry, consumers, what a great resource ASHA is. Dave, thanks for leading such a great team there and providing such great information for us and taking time to be with us on the show today.
A pleasure. Anytime. I always love chatting with you guys, and we'll look forward to seeing you soon. And anytime we can be of any help, just as I say, give me a call or shoot us an email. And thank you for what you do. It's really been I've loved watching Bridge the Gap blossom. So keep rocking. You guys do a great job.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, Dave. Absolutely. So all of our listeners can go to btgvoice.com, check out the BTG network there, connect with us on social, send us a note, and follow along. Thanks for listening to another great episode of Bridge the Gap.
Thanks for listening to Bridge the Gap podcast with Josh and Lucas. Connect with the BTG network team and use your voice to influence the industry by connecting with us at btgvoice.com.